Hello, my artsy friends. All right, so the prompt for today is slots. We are continuing with the Ugly Art Club's 5-minute challenge, and make sure you go check them out if you haven't already. Enrollment is going to be opening soon. They only open a couple times a year. Okay, so this spread today is a perfect example of having an idea in mind, thinking you know what you want to do, and it not going to plan, but I still wanted to share it with you guys because I think creative problem solving is so important. What happens when you think you know what's going on? You think you know what you're going to do, and then it just kind of falls apart. Don't get me wrong, I like where this ended up. I think it's pretty. I think it turned out well, but I think you guys all know and are with me when I say it can be frustrating when things are not going exactly how you want them to go during the process. Coming back later, looking at it is a lot of times you can get that clear perspective. So first mistake, I don't want to call it a mistake because I will not fix it. I will continue to work this way. During the 5-minute challenge, working with acrylic inks that are wet and adding water is very difficult because it takes a long time to dry. And of course, I do it when I have the biggest time crunch. So I say mistake, but it's not going to be something that I fix anytime soon because I love working with the acrylic inks. I love working with water and mixed media. So I will continue to do it. But I also know that it always causes me a bigger headache when I choose to work with them. This limited time setting. Okay, so back to the prompt of slots. I have this slot hole punch that I really like that I decided would be my main inspiration for this prompt. Now, again, making it harder on myself. I'm going to call it a mistake. It's not really a mistake, but I decided to, instead of just using black paper, I decided to use some black gesso on paper. Now, it dries pretty quickly for black gesso, but I also used probably the thinnest paper that I have, which is a receipt tape. It is what it is at this point, but I thought it would be fun to use that supply, but it made it really hard to punch the holes out and get them properly. Anyway, you live and you learn and you keep moving on. Now, I actually don't really mind the look of the kind of rugged punches since it didn't punch exactly clearly. I decided to sop up some of that acrylic ink with water. I don't always love the look of doing that. This was a hand mix pink acrylic, and it kind of gives it a smushed look. It's not bad, but I ended up just adding some scribbles and drying it as best as I can quickly with the heat gun. Now, I definitely go over time on this one. I think once the time limit hits, I kind of had that feeling of just like frustration, and I ignored the time and just tried to get this page to a place that I was happy with it, because in the end, I want to include it with all of the other pages in the journal that I'll be making, and I want to be in a place that I'm somewhat thrilled with it. Now, each page is not going to be your best spread. It's not going to be your most favorite. You can't have every page be your full favorite. But if you can work on that creative problem solving and getting each page to a place that you're happy with, then that's a good goal. At least to a spot that you're not unhappy with it, I think is a good goal too. So adding in some layers here of the collage, deciding where I want to put that little prompt tag. I decided to use the colored version today instead of the black and white ones that I printed out because I think the pink goes really well with it. I'm adding in some white gesso with my finger. I think when I'm doing the 5-minute prompts or I have a timer or I'm trying to work quickly, I tend to work with my fingers a lot more just because it's the closest supply that I have at hand and it makes it really easy. I definitely don't worry as much about the mess and such when I'm working quickly like this. I want to keep adding some interest onto the page. Everything is looking a bit flat to me right now, and so I'm trying to decide how I'm going to remedy that and how I'm going to get this to a spot that I like. As far as all the supplies that I'm using, I'm going to link those down in the description below. You can go and search for those if you're interested in any. So I'm deciding here if I want to add in any texture or textile elements to the page, maybe to make it feel a little bit more dimensional so we're not feeling so flat on the page. And this is just about auditioning different things. I have different supplies already on my desk that I pulled for this prompt. I picked my colors kind of ahead of time of what I wanted to use. And so I pulled out different fabrics, threads, things like that I knew would work with this color scheme. Adding a little bit more grunge back in. I like to make the collage elements look like they're not just sitting on top, but rather integrate with the pieces that are behind them and around them, and making the whole spread just feel more cohesive overall. I'm trying to think if I want to add some more into the bottom right corner of this spread, or maybe just let it be heavier up in the top corner. Now that the gesso has dried better on that receipt tape paper, the slot punch is working a little bit better. I still can't say it's working great just because of how thin the paper is and the heaviness of the paint on there. So, making a little bit more of that slot design, seeing if I want to add it someplace else on this paper. I want to encourage you to keep going. If you get into a rut, kind of like, you can just see that I'm not working as smoothly here as some of the other prompt videos or my other videos in general. Once something goes wrong, it's really easy to get derailed by that process, and it's hard to get back on track sometimes. So don't let that discourage you. It happens to all of us. Just because we end up with a good looking finished product doesn't mean that there isn't frustration along the way. I think it's all about working to improve our creative muscles, our creative problem solving. How can we get things to a spot that we're happy with, to break past maybe the preconceived ideas of what the page needed to be versus how the page is actually turning up. Things don't always go according to plan, and that's okay. We can continue to try different things. We can add in different materials. Maybe it means adding in a different color. There's a wide variety of things that we can do, and sometimes it's about loosening up those muscles that we're working with to just bring in some fresh new ideas. You see, I brought in the little scribble again. I'm going to add in some art marks. Sometimes going into that repetitive art making process can really help my mind to loosen up and be a little bit more free. Now, the thought that keeps coming back to me is that overall, things are just feeling too flat. The pink that is added is too flat. It doesn't have enough variations in it. And so I want to add in some more. So I decided to add in some orange. I could have added another variation of pink. I could have gone yellow. I decided for this neon orange color because the neon is a surefire way to add a pop onto the page. And I thought mixed with the pink would be a really pretty fun touch. Also, this orange is more transparent, which is another reason I picked it rather than the first one I had kind of brought up and thought about using. I like the transparent idea because it means it's not necessarily going to take over what is already on the page, but rather just enhance it and add to it. A few more final art marks will be the finishing touch on this one. And then I'm going to work on the page that is a complementary page to this one. So if you've watched the previous videos, if you've watched the intro video that I did for this challenge, I've decided to do the main spread, hopefully within the 5 minutes. As you can see, that doesn't always happen. But then I'm making a very simplified version, a complementary spread that can go with it. Now, my frustration continues even into this complementary spread, which is supposed to be the most basic version, but sometimes that's just how it goes when you start working. So I'm trying to push through it, and I'm remembering the next prompt is a new prompt. I get to start over. So I wanted to kind of emulate that slot shape that I did with the slot hole punch. And so I wanted to use just my paintbrush to kind of create that elongated oval shape. Now, the first ones that I didn't work very well. It had black gesso into it. I wasn't sure if I liked the grunge effect, so I switched brushes. The second brush I tried, it was too bristly. It didn't give me the shape I wanted, so I switched again, went to a third brush, and I liked the shape of this brush, this current brush that I'm using, but I wasn't sure if I liked how transparent that acrylic ink was that I was using, which I like it for its intended purpose to do kind of those drippy effects, but I wasn't liking it too much for the mark making. So again, I shifted, I pivoted, and I went with a heavy body luminous pink, luminous opera, I think is the color, and I knew that I loved that color, so I went with it. Adding in a few art marks here, I was thinking that just how it was a little bit too simplified, so I wanted to add some sort of marks onto it. I don't want to take away from the main page, so I decided to use a color that was very similar. I'm not introducing a new color again. My entire goal was to be more complementary with this second spread. I decided to keep with that slot shape and do those scribbles. You can just see there at the end the frustration was taking over, and I just like scribbled across the page. It is okay. That is the way that it goes. Sometimes you can hear me laughing now as I'm voiceovering because I'm remembering the frustration that I was feeling during this spread. But I am proud of myself for keeping going. And honestly, it's probably only because I was filming myself that I kept going. Maybe at this point I would have just set it aside and come back to it later, and that is okay. If you get to a frustrating part, you don't have to keep going if you really don't want to. You are allowed to start over. You're allowed to throw it away. You're allowed to come back to it later. You're allowed to give yourself permission to do these things. Nobody is grading you. Nobody is going to come by and tell you that you didn't stick to the quote unquote rules. The prompts are meant to be guidance. The 5 minutes are meant to be a suggestion. At least that's how I'm choosing to take it. Otherwise, I don't need more rules and more structure. I'm taking things as I want to take them, however is best for me in my individual art practice. Last up, I decided to take that little piece that I created and actually put it onto the top. And now I'm adding just a little bit of that orange in there too. I think without it, it didn't feel like these pages necessarily belong together, but now they kind of go together. And you know what? I am happy to look back on this spread. I think it turned out just fine. For me, I'm always going to remember the thoughts and the feelings that went along with it. Anyway, I will see you guys tomorrow, hopefully for a more smooth day 4.